Hello, Andrew Glass. So thank you so much for being a longtime customer of Let's Go Learn, and you're at Madrona Day Treatment.
Correct. Absolutely.
And I'm excited to be here because one of the things that's really hard is for people to know sometimes how do I use data? How do I use it to help students? How do I use it to improve outcomes? And you've been very successful. So I wanted to ask you a few questions and have sort of a casual conversation.
I'd love to. That would be quite enjoyable, actually.
Great. So maybe you could start off with just telling us really quickly, about Madrona Day treatment and maybe your position, and then we'll start diving into it.
Yep. Madrona Day Treatment is a non-public entity in the state of Washington. We serve about 12 or 13 school districts, which is a very students who have emotional and behavioral disorders whose IEP needs can't be met in their local district. We have recently expanded to meet the community need from 12 students to 20 students to 24 students, and now we're at 44. And our capacity is going to keep on going. So I am a special education teacher by trade, but I am one of the program supervisors at the program.
Great. I mean, that's amazing. Obviously that's one of the most needy populations and I know throughout the United States, it's arguably there's a huge epidemic on what's going on. And so it's great that you've dove in there and you're expanding. So let me ask you, what was one of the first problems that sort of sought you to find, the online system that we have and the data? What drove you to think, hey, I need something different?
Progress monitoring. Absolutely 100%. We partner with districts. We want to be the best. We want to set ourselves out from other agencies or other schools, and we want to be able to provide our customer with, when a learner comes to us, we want to provide them baseline data, and then we want to demonstrate growth. And that is something we've struggled with other programs. We've tried to use some other programs, but they weren't as robust as Let's Go Learn. They weren't as comprehensive as Let's Go Learn. And they didn't have all the features that Let's Go Learn has to be able to write an IEP per se, with all the data that those assessments provide.
So I'm going to ask a leading question here. I
Sure.
know, it's funny because for me as the CEO of the company, sometimes I develop stuff a little bit in a vacuum because I'm not in the field, right?
Yep.
And so I hear what we need. And then, of course, I read our own marketing material, but sometimes it's good to hear what actually works. So I know one of the things that we said was a lot of assessments start off and they don't have like the baseline data is not compatible with the progress monitoring data, right? Like baseline data could be 725 RIT score or some number. Is that what you found? Like, was that sort of the challenge when you said progress monitoring was hard that you didn't have that, or what exactly was the challenge of progress monitoring?
Just to get all of our learners to have a comprehensive, there are other programs that just do progress monitoring 3 times a year or 4 times a year. What Let's Go Learn was able to provide was not just progress monitoring through different intervals a year, but then we hybrid it. So we use direct instruction, and then we go back to the edge and use that component. The other thing we do is what Let's Go Learn does, and it's really awesome, is that, and I have to go, I've created a whole, just on decoding. You could go into the grade level skills. You could hit 10, and then it could design a whole prescriptive year long of reading instruction. And that takes away, in our environment, which is pretty intense, it takes a lot off the teacher, and it designs it right there for you. It tells you exactly what to teach, and it gives you just a comprehensive linear way to get to the goal.
Got it. So you're using like the IEP tool report where you can actually see the next skills you need to be working on. Is that what you're using?
Absolutely. We use that. I wrote, I'm not supposed to write IEPs anymore, but I wrote about 9 IEPs last year. And I took all the ELA IEPs I took right off Let's Go Learn if we got there. And it was so comprehensive. And the other great thing is it made it so the parents could understand
Hmm.
what I was talking about. And that's huge.
Yeah.
That is, we sit around at a table using acronyms and all sorts of stuff, but I was able to break things down pretty easy.
So you grab that profile paragraph. You know,
Absolutely.
it's funny, about 10 years ago, it we used to read like a reading specialist wrote it, and
Yeah.
then we realized we need to sort of make it more accessible. Like you can't say word attack. You can't say,
Hey, yep.
silent reading analysis, right? It's like people don't know what that means. So we totally revamped. So it's good to hear that that's helpful because it was meant for parents to be able to understand it for
It
sure.
is. And what also is really cool is that um, Let's Go Learn has um, you look at whole bunch of different skills. So hopefully and usually our students will be have some skills that they're stronger in, and then you could really our students, our learners usually have a lot of school failure. So to really demonstrate that there is some success, they're
Yeah.
not just there is some success and build off those strengths. Really is a nice way to change the framework of the IEP. And it's been really it's usually deficit based, and parents are just used to going, okay, I'm going to hear how my terrible my students
Don't worry, we'll
learn.
beep that out.
Oh, sorry, thank you. Hear how my learner's doing, and it allows us to be strengths based, and that's the way we run. And then it just gives such a different vibe for an IEP, and it starts building. We are a relationship based program, and it starts building that relationship. We're not just looking at what a kid can't do.
That's funny you say that 'cause that's part of what our we originally did in the original assessment was is you're right. What can they do, right? And in some ways it's interesting because in a diagnostic assessment as a human, you would be assessing someone, you see they struggle in the coding. Even if someone's a ninth grader, you might start off with a fourth grade passage. And that's exactly what we've always done for and so I'm glad to hear that that's helpful because it is meant to give kids feeling a little success, right? Like, hey, I actually read that and I felt great. I didn't get pummeled over the head with a grade level passage,
Right.
that obviously I can't do.
I
So
can't do right. And then that just is why do it. I'm gonna get attention, whether it's good or bad attention, then I just won't do it.
now
Uh,
how do you, as far as when your other teachers are writing IEPs, it sounds like you have a distributive process where everyone does it. So how does it work in terms of training your team to sort of use it? Like has that been a lot? I know a lot of organizations have a lot of new teachers or they have people obviously you're more experienced, you're in a position of leadership, but how do you bring in newer people and sort of train them a little bit on that? How's that worked for you?
so I know that implementation is, I was a public school teacher too. Implementation is always a challenge. Um, I, we have a position called a classroom lead. I have a classroom lead, two classroom leads who have some, I don't even know if it's called tech savvy, but are from the generation below mine that are much better technologically. And they rolled it out. And so I set a benchmark. I want 70% of our learners to be able to take the assessments to get use on the field on Let's Go Learn. And then this year, we have classes that we have 100% of learners that have already taken the first and are showing already on Edge. So what I did was everyone goes to the meetings that Let's Go Learn off. That's another thing I just want to let you know. The programs that you give, like we meet 3 times a year with somebody, we go over the data. That is unbelievable. I've worked with a lot of other vendors and different things, and it's set it and forget it. Here's the program, you paid the money, goodbye. Or what they'll do is they'll try to hustle you into all sorts of other training and then charge you all sorts of money. And we're a nonprofit, so I really appreciate that. So I get as many people as I can on those meetings.
That's great. That's good to hear. And you know
Awesome.
what? We call that operationalization, right? It's like
Yes.
everyone needs it. You can learn something in theory, but then how does it apply to me? And so the only way to do that is to have staged like before the test, after the first test, halfway through the year, blah,
Yep.
blah, blah. So I'm glad I see that's working for you guys.
Yeah. And so, Richard, another thing I do is that when we have like a non-student day, probably about every 6 weeks, I tell the teachers and those classroom leads, get on, let's go learn and start playing around, start looking at it, start becoming comfortable. And there are so many videos that you offer on there that walk you through the process. So if they have questions, most of them can be answered right there with all the videos.
That's great. So actually, let me ask you another question. Have you guys been using it for math as well, or is it
Oh
primarily?
yeah, oh
Yeah.
absolutely. Oh, so um, that's the other piece is that so where we're really go back to that strengths base. We have some kids that are really struggling with reading, but their math scores are much higher. So we're able to go in there and say, hey, we're going to keep on just committing to that reading. We see it, slower increase, but their math, these are some strong things that they're doing really well. And so, yeah, we use it for reading and math. And I like the math the same way. I use that to write IEPs. And um, I you sponsored, Let's Go Learn sponsored a professional development with Mitchell Yell,
Yeah.
the IEP guru god, who really talked about if you can't graph the IEP goal, then it's not. I mean, and I really it really simplifies the process to really setting up a growth model for our learners who come in a lot of times, at 10, 11, 12 years old, not really participating in school, having a lot of school failure. And then once we get them to buy in to like, hey, you can master something, you can sit here, you can learn, you can make some progress. We'll show it to you. It's
So
been
you'll
really
break it down then. So because the good thing is we have 44 subtests, right?
it's
So,
huge.
so you could show progress, like, hey, you would from here to here and place value or multiplication. So
Yep,
you guys will show that to the kid. You actually show that to your students.
absolutely. Addition with regrouping, I mean, is a big one. Those are all
Mhm.
big. Yeah.
That,
And yeah, it's great.
that's interesting because I found that a lot of times programs that have a lot of success really bring the student into the process. Because obviously, student motivation is probably one of the number one factors. The second one is the teacher, right?
Yeah.
Then, of course, it's all your tools and everything else. So I think that's interesting that you guys do that. That's great.
Yeah, it really is. I can't even imagine. I mean, I'm just thinking if I was still a public school teacher back in the olden days, it would just simplify things because I would break my day around because the data is just the data is the data and so easy to incorporate. And then I could take that data and do what, do I need to make a little mini lesson? Do I need to intensify? Do I need to back down? Where do I need to go with it? It really drives the instruction.
So when you make your goals, then, so when you train your teachers, sort of like what you said, if you've got to be able to graph it, right? So do you sort of set your annual goals in your IEP? Maybe it would be like a numeracy number, like a strand goal, or do you try to shoot for an overall reading goal and then you break it out into short-term tasks?
I do. I to and like, yeah, I really just want to show ambitious growth
Yeah.
in that IEP goal. So, I mean, sometimes when a student is doing has not demonstrated much, it's pretty easy to show ambitious growth. But what I've noticed for so many IEP goals, a lot of people set really unrealistic goals. A third grader is going to be or an eighth grader who's reading at a third grade level in a year is all of a sudden going to be reading at an eighth grade level with like 70% accuracy. I mean, that's just unrealistic. So we set realistic, ambitious goals on the data. Um, and then for those really intensive learners, those those intensive, especially
Yeah.
when it comes to reading, I actually will design just really uh, intensive, individualized the reading plans, whether it be phonemic awareness based on that, whether it be sight words, whether it be most of our students do really well in vocabulary, which is
Mhm.
really awesome. But it is that phonemic awareness and sight words and sounds. I mean, it's all, phonics.
Great. So you're setting those foundational because obviously those are the building blocks. If you can nail down their decoding, their phonics, you
That's
sort
it.
of you sort of set that maybe for the IEP goal, and you could set numbers on that, right? And
That's
so
it.
yeah,
Yep, exactly.
interesting. That's great. Well, that's fantastic. I'm glad you guys are using it this way. And like I said, again, this is really helpful because a lot of times there's a lot of tools out there, and I know it's hard for people to know, can this actually be operationalized into my environment? And so I'm glad that you guys are using the data the way it was
Yeah.
intended to be used.
And I appreciate it. And I'll tell you how I did a lot of research on Look It Up, and I'm a member of the Council for Exceptional Children. So why not go to something that's, where you have legitimate professionals? I saw you guys advertise there. I looked you guys up, and then I said, this is something that's definitely unique across the board. I was using another, like a very cheap program before. I got very poor buy-in, and took a lot of time. And now it's so seamless. And so I have a 5-year plan to keep on going on. What I'm also trying to do is get some of the partner school districts, trying to tell them I'm trying to put the word out, Richard. Let's go
Okay.
learn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll connect you with the person who
Yeah.
covers that area because I agree. You know what? If you can have your feeder schools coming in,
I,
and the thing I like talking about too is one thing I think is different about us is it's about vocabulary, right? If everyone is using the same data, the same terms, then it makes it easier to have a conversation. And part of the problem is when you don't have data like ours, it's like not having the vocabulary words to describe something, right?
exactly.
I can't describe your reading if all I have is a 725 ELA score.
Oh,
That doesn't tell me anything about how you're reading, right?
I can't, don't even, I know who does that, and they're so overly inflated, and I can't believe it. So as a professional, when I would get those, and even having my kids who went to school and they would show me their scores, I'm like, okay, that's great. That didn't tell me anything what they read, like those numbers.
Yeah, these scaled scores. There's a lot of things that
So,
have scaled scores, yeah, but
yeah, I'm like,
I know what you
give
mean. They're a
me
little obscure.
There it is. Like, give me, yeah, I want to go through the meat, you
Yeah.
know? I
I think
appreciate
that here's what it's sort of funny. I always say what we've done at Let's Go Learn, it's not rocket science. It's what you would naturally do as a good teacher, right? And it's just that we've just so happened to listen. And we had a great, Dr. McCollum who originally founded the company with me. He really was very hard about data has to inform the teacher of what do I do next.
that.
And that's sort of been our founding principle. And so I'm glad that this helped you, help your students. So
Yeah,
I want to thank you
yeah,
for,
thank you.
for this
And
interview.
we're looking forward to the MTSS stuff.
Great.
Yeah,
We're excited about that too. Yeah,
I know.
that's another important piece of the puzzle. And then of course, obviously we have new features always coming out. And so we're trying to drive more stuff.
I appreciate it. That's awesome.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
so
much.
much, Andrew. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.